Close your eyes. Listen to the sound of the ocean. Imagine you are 20 years old. You are sitting on a beach in Italy. The sun is trying to break through the gray clouds. For a second, you forget about the war. You reach into your pocket for a cigarette. And then, you hear it. It starts as a low rumble in the mountains, 30 miles away. Then it changes. It becomes a scream, a mechanical shriek that tears the sky apart. It sounds like a runaway freight train falling directly out of the heavens. You have exactly 2 seconds to dive. You don't think. You don't pray. You just hit the dirt. The explosion doesn't just kill, it erases. One moment, a supply truck is there. The next, there is only a crater the size of a swimming pool. This is the daily reality of Anzio. You are being hunted by a ghost, a weapon you cannot see, cannot fight, and cannot escape. To understand the horror of the gun, you must understand the tragedy of the trap. January 1944. The Allies launched Operation Shinglet, was supersaid to be a brilliant surprise attack to bypass the German defenses. We landed 36,000 men on the beaches of Anzio, just south of Rome. The door was open. The road to Rome was empty, but the American commander, General John P. Lucas, hesitated. He was cautious, too cautious. Instead of rushing forward to cut the enemy's throat, he ordered his men to stop and dig in. He waited for supplies. He waited for tanks. He waited too long. While Lucas waited, the German Field Marshal Albert Kessoring smiled. He rushed his divisions to the mountains surrounding the beach. He turned the high ground into a fortress. By the time the Allies tried to move, it was too late. Anzio had become a fishbowl. The Allies were the fish at the bottom, and the Germans were the cats sitting on the rim, looking down. The Germans had the high ground, but they needed a hammer to smash the fish in the bowl. Conventional artillery wasn't enough. They needed something that could reach every inch of the beachhead from the safety of the mountains. So, they called in the Eisenbahnbatterie, the railway battery. Down from the north came the steel monsters. Their official name was the Krupp K5, but the German crews, who lived and breathed with these machines, gave them names like pets. One was Robert, the other was Leopold. These were not tanks. These were not field guns. They were industrial nightmares. Each gun was 30 meters long, longer than a tennis court. They weighed 218 tons. Moving them required a dedicated team of engineers and a heavy-duty locomotive. They didn't just drive into battle. They arrived like a VIP train. And they found the perfect hiding spot, a railway tunnel near Castel Gandolfo, the Pope's summer residence, safely tucked inside the mountain, protected by millions of tons of rock. Robert and Leopold prepared to feast. But here is the problem. A railway gun has a fatal flaw. It is not a tank. It has no turret. The barrel is fixed to the carriage. It can look up and down, but it cannot look left or right. If the enemy moves 1 degree to the side, you can't shoot him. So, how did Anzio Annie target the entire beachhead? The solution was simple, brilliant, and incredibly tedious. The curved track. The German engineers laid down a specific section of railway track that curved gently outside the tunnel mouth. It was basic geometry. If you pushed the train forward on the curve, the barrel pointed west. If you pulled it back, the barrel pointed south. To aim the gun, they had to move the entire 218-ton train, inch by inch, until the mathematics aligned with reality. It was a slow, deliberate dance of steel. But once the coordinates were locked, the accuracy was terrifying. They could drop a shell into a specific supply dump from 30 miles away. The Allies controlled the sky. The U.S. Army Air Force and the Royal Air Force had thousands of planes patrolling the area. They knew the shells were coming from the Alban Hills. So why couldn't they destroy 2 big trains? Because the Germans played the game perfectly. The routine was clockwork. Wait for a gap in the air patrols. Roll out of the tunnel. Raise the barrel. Fire. 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 3 shots. That was usually the limit. Before the smoke even cleared, the diesel engine was already reversing, dragging the monster back into the dark throat of the mountain. By the time the Allied bombers arrived, screaming down to avenge their brothers, all they found were empty tracks and silence. They bombed the rails, They bombed the bridges. They cratered the landscape. But Robert and Leopold were safe underground, sipping diesel and waiting for the next shift. For the men on the beach, the Anzio Express was more than a weapon. It was a psychological torture device. The physical damage was bad, but the mental toll was worse. Because the shells traveled at supersonic speeds, sound played a cruel trick on the mind. If you were the target, you would hear the explosion before you heard the gunfire. There was no warning. No whistle. Just sudden oblivion. Soldiers developed superstitions. They made bets on the schedule. I bet a pack of Lucky Strikes she screams at 8:15. I bet she hits the harbor today. It became a dark joke, a way to cope with the helplessness. You could dig a foxhole 6 feet deep. You could cover it with logs. But you knew, if a 563-pound shell hit you, none of it mattered. You weren't fighting a soldier. You were fighting gravity. And gravity always wins. The Allies were tired of being targets. They wanted to fight back. They dragged their heavy artillery onto the beachhead. The 155mm long toms. And the massive 8, these were powerful guns. They could smash a tank from miles away. But against the Anzio Express, they were useless. It was a matter of simple physics. The long toms had a maximum range of about 15 miles. The K5 Railway Gun could hit a target at 40 miles. It was a knife fight against a sniper. The German gunners could park their train, brew some coffee, fire a massive shell, and then watch the Allied counterfire land harmlessly in the fields, 10 miles short of their position. It was a humiliating spectacle. The most powerful army in the world was being bullied by 2 trains it couldn't touch. But wars are not won by wonder weapons. They are won by breaking the line. In May 1944, the stalemate finally broke. The Allies launched Operation Diadem. It was a massive wave of steel and men that smashed through the German defenses in the south. The forces trapped at Anzio burst out of their cage. Suddenly, the math changed. The 40-mile range didn't matter anymore because the Allied tanks were no longer sitting on the beach. They were rushing up the roads, heading straight for Rome. Straight for the tunnels. The hunters had become the hunt for the German crews of Robert and Leopold. Panic set in. These guns were designed to kill from a distance, not to fight a tank battle. And they had a major problem. They were too heavy to run. The railway network was crumbling under Allied bombing. There was no way to get the monsters back to Germany. The order came down from high command. Destroy them. It must have been a heartbreaking moment for the crews. They had lived with these machines for months. They had named them. Now, they had to kill them. They rolled the guns onto a sidetrack north of Rome. They packed heavy explosives into the breeches and the barrels. They set the fuses. And they ran. 2 dull explosions echoed through the Italian hills. The Anzio Express had made its final stop. On June 7, 1944, shortly after the liberation of Rome, American soldiers stumbled upon a railway yard near Civitavecchia. The fighting was over. The silence was heavy. What they found stopped them in their tracks. Looming over the twisted rails were the corpses of 2 metal giants. This was the first time any Allied soldier had stood this close to Anzio Annie. The scale was incomprehensible. Standing next to the wheels, a grown man looked like a toy soldier. The Germans had done their job. The barrels were blown open, peeled back like banana skins by the internal explosions. But the massive carriages, the complex loading mechanisms, the heart of the beast, it was still there. The Americans realized this wasn't just wreckage. It was a trophy. Intelligence officers swarmed the site. They decided that Leopold could be saved. But how do you ship a 280-ton train across the Atlantic Ocean during a war? It was a logistical nightmare. The gun was disassembled. The massive barrel, the carriage, the bogies, everything was loaded onto Liberty ships and sent to the Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland. There, American engineers performed a resurrection. They studied every bolt, every gear. They marveled at the precision of German engineering. They even test-fired it, but their conclusion was clear. It was a masterpiece. Yes, but a useless one. In a war of movement and air power, a gun that needed a railway was a dinosaur. Today, Leopold is the last of his kind. The other gun, Robert, was scrapped in Italy, lost to history. But Leopold survived. He sits today at the U.S. Army Ordnance Training and Heritage Center in Virginia. You can go there. You can walk up to it. You can touch the cold steel that once terrified thousands of men on an Italian beach. It is silent now. The scream is gone. The paint is fading. It looks like a fossil from a lost civilization. A reminder of a time when nations thought that building the biggest gun was the key to ruling the world. The story of the Anzio Railway Gun is the perfect summary of Hitler's war machine. It was terrifying. It was advanced. But it was a waste. While Germany built expensive giants like the K5 and the Maus tank, the Allies built thousands of simple, ugly Sherman tanks and trucks. The ghost train could kill men, but it couldn't stop an army. It was a weapon of fear, not victory. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the iron monsters of World War II, make sure to hit that like button. It helps the algorithm find more hidden history. And tell me in the comments, if you were a commander, would you choose one super weapon or 100 normal tanks? I read every comment. Don't forget to subscribe to Strange Files of History. We are digging up the past, one giant gun at a time. Thank you for watching. To discover more untold stories of World War II, please click the video on your screen. See you next time.